coming at you live from the lower bottoms of West Oakland. It is Soundwaves, and today I have a very special guest. I have Yana Ludwig, who is running for an open Senate seat, the open Senate seat in the state of Wyoming, the first time since 1996 that there's going to be an open election in Wyoming. Please welcome Yana Ludwig!
Ooh, yeah. Hi.
I wish I had the whole crew in here. I'm so sorry. And I have to find like a hand clapping thing because right now the only effect I have is this. And that just doesn't work for introducing someone.
No, not ideal. But that's okay. That was a pretty good introduction.
So I discovered you because I have a friend who I met through touring in I guess it's your neighboring state, Montana. It's above you.
Yep, they're in the Northwest. Yep.
His name is Josh Stelling. He's a Democratic Socialist out there, and he had shared something you had said a while back, and I'm like, who is this person? And I'm lightweight involved with volunteering out here for Shahid Buttar, who's running for Congress against Nancy Pelosi. So anyone, in my opinion, that is challenging a establishment candidate, Democrat or Republican, I definitely think needs to be heard, especially people that have very, very progressive platforms like yourself. And then I went down the rabbit hole of Wyoming media.
Uh-huh.
Yana and I were talking a little bit before we started recording. Anyone that listens to the show knows that I definitely have toured quite a bit. A lot of people that listen to the show also have toured. We all know Wyoming as being a very vast, not very, I think is it over 600,000 people in the state right now?
No, I think we're at 570 and dropping.
Jesus. Are they just leaving or they're just old?
Some of both, but mostly just leaving. And, it doesn't help that like a lot of our economy is collapsing as fossil fuels are collapsing. So we can get into talking about that. But a lot of people are just leaving. And like a lot of young people don't feel like they have much opportunity here. And a lot of people leave because they can't get healthcare, and particularly mental health care. So we have a terrible epidemic here, and a lot of people leave rather than killing themselves, which seems like a good choice. But Wyoming depopulated gradually.
So I found an article. I believe it was in I want to say Casper Times. That's what it's called.
Star Tribune, probably.
Casper Star Tribune. And it was about the suicide rate in Wyoming. And apparently you guys are second to Alaska as far as, and it was up, and this was from October of last year. And there was a 40% jump in suicides. And the study that was done had some kind of shocking numbers. You have the highest rate of suicide among people 35 to 44. I would assume a lot of that has to do with the fracking industry and the up and down nature of that. As I also worked in North Dakota I cooked in a housing facility for oil field workers.
Wow. I sort of want to hear all the stories about that, but yeah.
No, you do not. 68.7% of the people in the state of Wyoming claim they only think they have adequate health care, and that's one of the lowest rates in the nation. In some Wyoming counties, there are fewer than one doctor per 1,000 residents, and several of these counties don't even have OBGYNs, anesthesiologists, ER doctors, and I assume a lot of that has to do with the closing of rural hospitals.
Yeah. And like, don't even try to get an abortion because there's only one place in the entire state where you can do that. So the whole medical industry is really, really hurting. in this state. Yeah, and a lot of it is like we just can't keep doctors. I mean, we can't pay them well enough. The conditions suck, and so a lot of medical personnel move here and then stay for a couple years and then leave.
So it sounds to me like capitalism is single-handedly sticking its foot in the behind of the great state of Wyoming.
Yeah, that's a good
That
way to summarize it.
that being said, in listening to your interviews, how do you try to combat the ingrained red baiting um, in just your running in general?
Mhm.
Especially when it comes to things like this, you have a suicide rate that is the highest in the nation among people 35 to 44. And you would think that your platform, one of a Green New Deal, one of healthcare for all, would be looked upon as a bit of saving grace and not so much as Stalin's return.
Right. Well, I mean, basically, when I decided to run, one of the things that I have been saying all along is I'm not going to run unless I can run honest. Like, I suck at lying. I'm terrible. I'm really bad at it. And it was like, I'm not going to be able to get through a year and a half long campaign, which is, basically what we were setting ourselves up for because I started last June. And like be able to do anything other than be me because I'm just constitutionally not cut out for bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is, if you are a Democrat in this state, you get labeled a socialist anyway. And so I was like, I'm just going to fucking own it. I mean, and I'm going to talk about it and we're going to actually see if we can get some conversations going that are a little bit different than like red baiting and now I shut up, red baiting and now I shut up, which is pretty much the rhythm that's happened. Anytime anybody's gotten anywhere close to even just advocating for a robust public sector, let alone actual socialism. And so I was like, let's just like go on an educational campaign about what socialism actually is and make that one of the things that we're doing. And so that's been how we've approached it is like, somebody's like, you're a socialist. And I'm like, yep. So like, why be in denial about it? I mean, it seems like much more productive to just like really lean into it. And so that's what we've been doing. And, and it's been interesting. I mean, I think a lot of people have images of what they think socialism is that are just like flat out wrong. And I don't know if it sounds like you've done a much more thorough job of like your like background digging on me than most people do. But I did this one interview that maybe you caught just like about a month ago with this guy on the west side of the state. And we ended up going down the rabbit hole about worker ownership, which to me is like the single most important thing about socialism. Like if we really
It
want
wasn't
to.
your was that your interview with Destiny?
No, it wasn't Destiny. It was another local guy who, who's
Okay.
trying to like, give everybody some airtime and like didn't really know what to do with me. But we went down and so I was trying to explain that like, like the crux of socialism, the idea of like, workers owning the means of production, like literally means that they are the owners of wherever they work. And I was trying to explain it. And he's like, and he like, I think 3 times was like, but who owns it? It's like
Jesus.
the workers own it. Like he's like, but so they're like shareholders. I'm like,
Oh my God.
no, it's just a completely different model. But just the like people who, and basically this guy is like a smart guy. And so it's
Mm-hmm.
like even people who are like fairly intelligent that have been super indoctrinated in there is no option other than capitalism having an owning class that is separate from a working class and they have all the power. Like that is what we've been indoctrinated into thinking is like the only way to do things. And just watching this guy who like up until that point in the interview had been asking intelligent questions and like being an intelligent conversation suddenly go completely fucking stupid and like couldn't even grasp what I was saying was like wild, like I guess I haven't seen that kind of cognitive dissonance kick in among somebody doing an interview before. And so it was just fascinating. And I finally just had to say, you know what, dude, you're just going to have to trust me that it's a different thing. You know?
That's kind of you know what's funny about that? Like I'm starting to get to a point now. Like I don't want to say studying because I really haven't been studying, but um I'll be 43 this year, so I definitely came of political like consciousness during the time where right wing people took over AM radio.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I actually grew up listening to Rush Limbaugh because that's what came on after the San Francisco Giants games and things like that on the radio when I would
Uh-huh.
listen to like games. Um, and the right wing does a great job of simplifying things,
Yep.
and I feel like the left doesn't do as good of a job because it can get real wonky real quick.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
everyone's a Marxist scholar, and reading Marx isn't easy for the average
Mm-hmm.
person, especially if you're maybe have a high school level education, um, or below. And that's
I
why I love guys like
think for
Richard Wolff.
you. I mean, it's like
Would you
not
say?
easy to read Marx. Like Marx is
Yeah.
tough. It's hard stuff. Yeah. Yeah. And so I do think we need to like figure out how to like simplify messages down, you know? And it's good. I mean, in some ways I feel like we have a big advantage in that we are post the Occupy movement because that phrase, the
Yeah.
99% and the 1%, like that is incredibly useful shorthand for a lot of this. So I feel like we're sort of better positioned than we certainly were like 10 years ago to be able to be, having some simple ways to talk about things that like people have already taken in at least to some degree. And so I think that's been super helpful.
Like, I feel like the Tea Party movement even kind of weaponized that rhetoric to be really anti-establishment Democrats. Like,
Mm-hmm.
if you think about the 2016 and the Trump campaign against Hillary Clinton, the big knock on Hillary Clinton from the Trump campaign was that she was taking all this Wall Street money and she was in the pocket of Wall Street. Yet Donald Trump's, I believe his campaign manager or finance manager was Steve Mnuchin.
Right, right.
That's like Wall Street ghoul personified. So how can you demonize one person? And then it really caught fire to the point where Fox News definitely went and ran with it. And then it becomes the rhetoric kind of that person that calls the show and says, "Why do you hate America?" Right? Because
Right, right.
but the people that are telling you to hate Hillary Clinton are doing the exact same thing, if not worse.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Like, how do we
Yeah.
point out that hypocrisy?
Well, mm, I mean, the way that I've started to talk about it, and this has developed like over the course of the campaign and like doing a lot of these interviews, and it's helped to be on. I mean, podcasts actually have been like some of the best places for me to like figure out how to talk about this stuff. But I've been getting in. I promise I'll circle back to your point in a second. But
Sure, sure, sure.
so I've been getting into all kinds of trouble with the vote blue no matter who people
Oh,
because so I endorsed Bernie Sanders and have said publicly that I'm not going to endorse Joe Biden. And my opponent in the Democratic primary, which we actually have one, which is kind of amazing, that there's going to be a
in
Democratic primary
August, in August,
in
correct?
August. I know August 18th. Yeah. And she's kind of gone on this public trip about like, well, you shouldn't be running as a Democrat if you're not going to endorse Joe Biden and like fully support his campaign. And I've been like, look, my line is not between the Democrats and the Republicans. My line is between neoliberal capitalism that is sucking the life out of our communities and basically eco-socialism, which actually offers a promise for like working class solidarity and a Green New Deal and a world that is actually livable for the 99%. And unfortunately, that line runs down the middle of the Democratic Party. It doesn't
Yes.
run neatly between the Democrats and the Republicans. And so when Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says Joe Biden and I shouldn't even be in the same party, I'm like, I am with you. I am in her party. Whatever her
Yeah.
party is, that's the party I'm in. And it's not the same thing as Joe Biden. And, and I'm in these like endless debates, and now everybody's like, she's a Trump fan. And I'm like, okay, so if Trump is over there and Joe Biden is like a little closer in and I am like way further out, why would I, like, if I can't stomach Joe Biden, why would I support Trump? Like, that doesn't make like any fucking sense at all. So now we're in this thing of like where I've basically said, like, you know what I think you should be doing with your vote? I think you should be using your own discernment. That's what I think you
Yeah.
should be doing. I am not going to tell you how to vote. That is not my job. My job is to be running a Senate campaign that actually offers some hope to all of the people in Wyoming who have never had anybody representing them, which is immigrants, it's the disability community, it's the LGBTQ community, it's the indigenous folks, it's like all of these different people, and it's the progressive lefties. And yes, there actually is a growing number of us in Wyoming. And so that's actually my job, is to offer an option in this race. Your job is to decide how to use your votes based on what is actually going to be good for you and your communities, or at least the best you can do. And I don't know what that is for your community. You know what that is for your community. And if that gets you to say, I'm going to vote for Joe Biden, bless you, vote for Joe Biden. That is totally fine with me. But think about it and like really analyze it. And that's where I'm coming down. And I am in so much hot water right now with like the centrist Democrats in Wyoming because I'm telling people to use their own brains. Ah!
Well, it's the illusion of choice, right? So people
Right.
kind of, it's you're either Coke or Pepsi. Which
Right.
are you? And I don't think people really understand it is the Coke or Pepsi, kind of the same thing, slightly different in front of you, and people don't get it. I personally think Donald Trump is done.
Yeah, God, I hope so.
And he's done. It's over. You can't come back from this.
Mm-hmm.
You just don't. There's no way you can come back from it. Um, and I really believe, and this is just me talking out of the deepest, darkest region of my behind. I really, really, really believe that it's going to be a brokered convention,
Mm.
and Gavin Newsom's going to get the nod.
Oh, interesting. See, everybody has their theory about who is going to get the nod. What it will, I don't know. I mean, for so many of us, I think like put the nail in the coffin of our relationship with the Democratic Party is probably if it's a brokered convention and they put Hillary Clinton in. It's like,
No,
already? Didn't we do this already? Like,
she, I think she likes her position as some sort of almost queen-like figure of the Democratic Party. When I think of Hillary Clinton in 2020, I think of her like the queen in England. Like,
uh-huh,
she
uh-huh.
says ridiculous shit every so often, and people listen to her, and we all go, "Why are you even listening to her?"
Right, right.
Um, but she's the
Yeah,
queen of the Democratic Party.
right, right. Yeah.
Uh, that's good. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, it's an interesting thing. I mean, I've applied to be a Bernie delegate to our state convention and had thought, what I really want to do then is like go to the national convention. And I think I probably still want to do that. Like I think I want to be one of those Bernie folks who are there and are still like holding this line for like, no, we actually need a real candidate. And so yeah, so it's going to just be really interesting to see how all this plays out. But I do think that the Democratic Party could do things that would redeem them to some extent in progressives' eyes, and then they could do a whole bunch of stuff which will probably cause riots. So it's going to be fascinating to see what actually happens. You Yeah.
I know. So I want to get back to your platform in Wyoming because I
Yeah.
do find Wyoming to be an important state because I think, I live in a coastal state, and not just a coastal
Mhm.
state. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area where
Yeah.
I am in the tech capital of the world. I have worked for some of the bigger tech firms here in the city, like many people here have.
Hmm.
Um, So a lot of people here have no real understanding on what fracking is and what
Mm.
fracking does to the environment. They don't understand places like Wyoming and Colorado and then North Dakota have effed up drinking water. The landscape of the place has changed drastically because of it. You are definitely pro environment, and you had some interesting things to say about fracking,
Yeah,
which
well,
I'm sure gets you in some hot water out there.
yeah, it does. And I'm not spending that much time talking about fracking. I'm spending a lot more time talking about coal actually. And
Mm-hmm.
um, I mean, Wyoming has a little bit of everything when it comes to like fossil fuel development. So you could pick any fossil fuel issue, and we would have something horrible happening in the state around that issue. Um, the reason that I focused most of my attention actually on coal is that, you know, the coal industry has been slowly dying for a very long time. And many people in the state have been trying to get our state legislature to take seriously this concept of diversifying our economy
Mm-hmm.
for years. And they've been stubbornly refusing to do that. And meanwhile, the pattern that's happening is the sort of vulture capitalist pattern where these coal mines will go bankrupt,
Mm-hmm.
and which wipes out many of their obligations to the local communities that they're a part of, to the state of Wyoming, and to their workers. And so they'll go bankrupt. And like one of the really bad ones last summer was a company that owned a couple mines, and literally people found out that they didn't have jobs because their paychecks bounced on Friday. That was how they found out. Like
That's insane.
it was totally fucking insane. And meanwhile, the CEOs walk away from it with a $200,000 bonus, which is not that huge, you know, on the scale of horrible capitalists, but wiping out the coal miners' pensions, their paychecks are bouncing, and you're still walking away from this deal with a chunk of money. And then it gets sold to the next vulture who comes in, owns the mine for a year or a year and a half, repeat, go through the cycle again, repeat. And so these communities have just been being like battered constantly by this. And this is like the core economy of a lot of our communities in Wyoming. Like it is coal. And so one of the things that I've been talking about is that I think the best framing that we should be using from this is the idea that coal is in hospice. And, you know, so coal is dying. And, you know, and it's kind of like that uncle that you really like dislike on some level, but he's family, you know, you know, and he's kind of a dick politically, but he's family. It's kind of like that. And many coal families are suffering terribly right now. I mean, the economic insecurity that a whole bunch of us are experiencing with COVID, like coal families have been through that cycle over and over and over again. And to me, it's like, you know, when somebody's in hospice, you do your best to like lovingly help them get through this transition. And I think we need to be doing that. Like, I think our coal families need us right now, and that they are part of the working class, and that, you know, if we're really going to be living up to our socialist values, we can't be being cold about that. Like we have to be compassionate and caring about what's going on with these families. And we also have to be clear-eyed about the fact that like, yep, the guy's going to die and there is going to be an after, and we need to be doing some planning. You know, I mean, the gift of hospice is that you can midwife that process in a good way and still be making plans. And like nobody's going to get mad at you if you acknowledge that it's a hospice situation for like making plans for what comes next. And so that's the framework that I've been using around coal. And it's, you know, I mean, fossil fuel prices have like tanked. We're seeing another round of layoffs right now that, you know, the immediate cause is COVID, like it is for, you know, many of us. But it's just like a faster dip into that like dropped off cycle that keeps happening. And so that's kind of the approach that I've been taking to it. And like, I think it's really important that we not leave coal miners out of that kind of working class solidarity framework. And I get really frustrated with liberals who say things, any sentence that starts with, well, coal miners should just blah, 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 pisses me off to no end.
Learn how to code. Have you heard
Yeah.
that one?
Oh my God, the learn to code thing is like, it's like that, it's fine if that's an option. Like, there's nothing wrong with learning how to code, but it's like this, like looking your nose down at people and treating them as if they are not human beings who have their own dreams, who have their own desires for their lives, who have varied interests. It's like we've created this image of coal miners as being this like one dimensional thing, and it's just bullshit. And it is so ridiculously elitist. And so, it's just, don't even get me started. It makes me really mad. So, um, yeah.
So
So,
whenever Donald Trump says clean coal, they take the coal and they clean it.
yeah,
Does it like make your brain
yeah,
explode like it does
yeah,
mine?
totally. I mean, what does Donald Trump say that doesn't make my brain explode to some extent? But yes, that particularly as a Wyomingite makes my brain explode. Yeah. And it's just like more like, let's just find ways to prop it up. This is like I guess the equivalent would be the like, but they've got a new cancer thing in production. It's going to save you. And it's like, it doesn't arrive on time for Uncle Joe. You know what I mean? It just doesn't arrive on
Yeah.
time to save your uncle. And so, like, we would just be so much better off. And right now, the state is really, really feeling it. It's like we have relied so much. Like the other way that I think you should be seeing it as hospice is that, like my kids have really great public schools because of fossil fuels. And to like be in denial about that is just dumb. It's like the reality is like we have a lot of things about this state that are terrific because of fossil fuels, and that reliance just on fossil fuels is kicking our asses right now. And so, we've got to like be able to go like, I honor you. You've been great for my state. And now we need to move on.
Do you think that is like, because I have a similar issue here. I'm from a city called Richmond, California.
Mm-hmm.
And Chevron is a huge force in Richmond. It employs quite a few people, but it's also a huge reason for all kind of problems. Like when there's a fire, there's some sort of retardant that they put on the fire that when it goes into the atmosphere, it definitely causes some problems. I want to say the city of Richmond sued Chevron at one point in time, in like the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I'm very well aware of the complicated relationship between a large fossil fuel company and the survival of citizens and the upward mobility, the creation sometimes of a middle class for minorities
Mm-hmm.
that a lot of these factories provide. Which is why I saw the Green New Deal as such an awesome bill.
Yeah. Well,
Much
particularly Bernie
much like the
Sanders.
New Deal. Yeah, yeah. Bernie's Green New Deal, by the way.
Bernie's Green New Deal is like, yeah, I mean, it's like as much a jobs creation program and a racial justice program as it is an environmental program. And it's like I'm a huge fan. And there are things I would tweak in there, but just a huge fan of the general approach. I think his team did an amazing job with putting that together.
Side note: did you watch Michael Moore's new documentary?
I have not yet. No.
Have you read any of the critiques or anything from it yet?
I saw from a couple of my friends on Facebook who are like there's this like pretty racially diverse bunch of socialists that I'm connected to on Facebook, and I've just seen like a lot of like, what the fuck was that? But I haven't actually like watched it yet to know what the fuck is about.
He basically went after like Bill McKibben,
Oh, interesting.
and yeah, because Bill McKibben is that dude for the environmental justice movement. And
Hmm.
has been for some time now. And Bill McKibben takes a lot of hits from fossil fuel industry. And I'll let you be the judge. Maybe I'll even post a link it's for free on YouTube on the show.
Oh,
But I also read Bill McKibben's Rebuttal in I want to say
oh,
Common Dreams, and it was pretty intense.
yeah. Well, what
Even
do you
even
think?
Naomi Klein. I'm not gonna lie. I don't know much about biomass, and Michael Moore. I didn't like him for a while, um, because of I just there was something about, was it Bowling for Columbine, that just didn't sit right with me.
Huh, uh-huh.
I dug it to a point, but then some of it felt kind of what did Bill McKibben call him? A carnival barker. There's kind of an air of that about him, but
Yeah.
then I want to say around 2016, during this last election, I felt that some of the stuff he was doing was really interesting. Um, but watching again, I didn't know that much about the movement. The biomass, they basically were saying that biomass is part of, it's just as bad as the fossil fuel industry, and you need a lot of fossil fuels to use it. I don't think it told the story 100% of alternative forms of energy. It kind of was like, yeah, all these alternative forms of energy are kind of co-opted by these big time capitalists. And it's true to a point, but
Mhm.
there's also places that are not like that. Like, read Naomi Klein's very short book about Puerto Rico, where she's in a part of Puerto Rico where they have their own grid. It's totally
Right.
solar and wind.
Right.
So that movie definitely did the Michael Moore thing, and I think it got rushed out, in all fairness.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he's trying to do it on Earth Day. Apparently, he was going for an actual studio release. So
Mm-hmm.
I'll
Mm-hmm.
put a link to it on this show, and,
That sounds
and I'll
good.
let the people
That sounds good.
decide.
Yeah.
How does coal and are, do they frack on indigenous land in Wyoming?
Oh, that's a good question. I should know the answer to that, and I don't off the top of my head. And fracking is a relatively new thing here. I mean, we've still had abundant stuff you don't have to frack to get to.
Yeah.
Um, so we haven't quite had to go there, but it is definitely happening in Wyoming at this point. But that's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I think if it's frackable, they probably are because they zero respect for Indigenous people in the state, like they do in pretty much every other state as well. Um, yeah, so I don't know the answer to that, and I'm a little embarrassed to say that, but I don't.
No, no. I think people would be surprised on how much we don't really know about that side of what really happens on indigenous land. When I was in North Dakota, there was definitely a lot of issues with fracking. I wasn't near the Dakota Access Pipeline,
Hmm.
but where I was at in Williston, we were kind of near some native land, and yeah, that'll be another show for another time.
Hmm.
That
Yeah,
being said, you are not trying to take everyone's gun away.
I'm not actually. I'm pretty pro Second Amendment. Yeah, yeah. Well, and yeah, yeah, that whole thing. Uh, yeah, I mean, to me, like I think that the United States has a problem with violence as a problem solving tool. And that is true interpersonally with like domestic violence. It's true with police violence. It's true with militarization. And it's true with like sometimes people pick up a gun and do really shitty, horrible things with it because they're trying to solve something. And so to me, it's like I think that there's one or two loopholes that we ought to be closing in terms of gun policy. And one of them is actually that, domestic abusers they can't buy guns if they have actual convictions, but they can own them and use them. And among other things, that means that the uh, estimated 40% of cops in this country who are domestic abusers have total access to guns. And I don't think they should. I mean, so I have no problem with like, we should be just like absolutely across the board. If you were a domestic abuser, regardless of what your work is, you shouldn't have access to guns. And over half of the people who have done mass shootings in the United States have domestic violence charges against them. And so I think that it's like, if we want to close that problem up, that's the number one leverage point for closing that off. And after that, like, I want us to have some really big picture conversations about culture and violence. And I want us to do some serious police reform, because like taking guns away from your like average citizen while the cops are still able to be like fully loaded and they get away with horrific garbage is like, that doesn't make any sense to me at all. And we're also seeing like gun ownership is up among people of color and socialists. And I'm like, I'm not going to disarm those people.
Yeah.
Like, not
Yeah.
happening. So yeah. So it's probably for like very different reasons. And I also grew up in like hunting and fishing culture, like super rural. And so like I get it. And I get it that like for some people, like the funnest thing in their week is going and shooting tin cans in the back 40. And I'm like, have at it. Like, it's totally fine with me. Like they're not hurting anybody. And we have the highest per capita gun ownership of any
Yes.
state in Wyoming. And the only school shooting we've ever had involved a crossbow. Like, yeah, totally weird. And so there's not this like one-to-one correlation between like a bunch of gun ownership and like school shootings or these other things that I think are like horrific, terrible problems that we absolutely need to be doing something about. But I don't think taking guns away from most people is like the answer to it. So yeah, so I'm not taking your guns away.
I just wanted you to have an opportunity to say that so you can
Thank
like
you.
sample it and use it as a clip. So when people try to say you're a socialist taking their gun away, you can be like, and you have your talking.
50% right. You on that, Yana, for YO quiz that you just took. Yeah.
Yana For Wyoming does not want your gun.
Yeah. Like, please, God. Like, I don't own one myself. I mean, to me, it's like a little bit like, so I've never had an abortion.
Mm-hmm.
You should absolutely be able to get abortions. I don't own a
Yes.
gun. You should absolutely be able to own guns. Like, to me, they're not that different. It's like, people's lives look like what their lives look like. We make the choices that we make, and it doesn't have to be about like what I want to be doing or what I have done. I think you should have rights to make certain choices for yourself.
Now, part of your platform is economic insecurity.
Yeah.
We just talked about how I guess the big industry in Wyoming is fossil fuels in general, right?
Yeah.
Coal mining, um, and with the up and down nature of that and how that can really bankrupt a town, a city, a county, etc. What is the strategy moving forward?
Well, I mean, I think, a lot of people have been like, what industry are you going to replace coal with, for instance? And I'm like, I don't think it's a one-to-one relationship. I think actually what we see, what's modeled to us from the natural world, which has been doing this survival thing for a very long time, is that like diversity is resilience. And so I think the biggest problem is that we have, like an industry that is most of the economy. And then we have a company that is the largest employer in the state, which is Walmart. And so I think we have dual issues. I think we have a fossil fuel issue and we have a Walmart issue. And so what I really want to see is lots of different things that become part of the Wyoming scene. And so that's solar and wind. I mean, we're a really good state for both of those. We have, many sunny days here. We have lots of wind here. When the wind stops blowing, I get nervous. I'm like, what's wrong? Something's missing here. There's so much wind here. I think we should also be looking at legalizing marijuana, which, is another thing that like, all that money right now is going to Colorado, basically. And, I think it ought to be staying in state. And I think we should be decriminalizing it and like not spending a bunch of money locking people up for nonviolent drug charges that are pot related. And I also think that there are things that we could be looking at around how we have our economy structured. And so this is like the worker ownership for me. is a big part of this. Like when, like, so the CEO to worker wage ratio in this country at this point is 361 to 1. Never in a worker owned cooperative, and I work with a bunch of them, never have I ever heard a conversation that sounds something like, Bob over here, Bob is just so much more worthy and smart and hardworking than the rest of us, that he should be making 361 times what the rest of us are making. That does not happen in a democracy. And what we're talking about with worker ownership is basically democratizing the economy, right? And so and that also means that there's a lot more money that stays in your local communities and that is distributed in good wages among people, that like the same company, if it was worker owned, would have better wages, would have more security for people. And worker co-ops are more successful generally. I mean, people are much more invested in their place of work when they are an owner. And so I want us to have worker ownership be a legal structure that's okay in Wyoming. Like right now, you can't even organize as a worker owned cooperative in this state. The closest you can get is this thing called a close LLC, which basically says if you ever fold, it has to be a consensus decision. And it's like, that's not worker
Really?
ownership. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, that's how so I actually, so my, so I live in a residential intentional community, and we have a podcast and a small farming business, and we're organized as a close LLC because it was the closest thing that we could get. But we're basically a worker owned cooperative in terms of how we function. So I think we should be doing that. I think we should be having public banks in every state so that finance is something that actually supports our state budgets instead of having all of that money going to Wall Street and having like municipalities and counties basically gouged by Wall Street in order to do public infrastructure programs. And so I think there's a whole bunch of different things. So it's not just about like, what are the industries? Like, yes, that's a really important question, but it's also how are we structuring money in our state? And how are we structuring work in our state? And I think we need to be working on both of those fronts. And nobody else is talking about that stuff. It's all like, well, maybe we could do a little more like with solar or, fuels. Like, that's great. I mean, yes, let's do that. But then can we also think a little bit more systemically about this stuff and like who actually has power and who actually is getting the benefits from our economy? I think it should be our state and our local communities and our workers.
Oh my God, I just lost my. Oh, so we got to talking when I was messaging you about postal banking.
Yeah, in the post office. Totally.
Can you give a quick description on what that would be for, and do it in a way like it's someone's first time ever hearing postal banking?
Yeah. So basically, what it would mean is that the post office would be a place where you could do things like cash your paycheck. So just like very simple, very basic, not like full service banking like a bank would be doing, but making banking accessible for people who like they don't like if you're poor enough, you can't get a bank account. And
Yeah.
that means that your only option for cashing checks, unless you can get somebody to do it for you who does have an account and whose bank is okay with that practice, which is increasingly rare, is
Mm-hmm.
go through payday lenders basically, and which absolutely screw people over. And so, it's one of the ways that it is very expensive to be poor in this country. And postal banking just opens the door for there to be a no cost or low cost way for people to do these really simple things that in the modern world you need to be able to do to survive.
I love the idea of postal banking. I myself am I don't want to say victim. I kind of knew what I was getting into, but it was a bit of a necessity. I have a payday loan on my car.
Oh, ouch.
And it's like, I think for the money that I used, which wasn't much, we just needed it to go on a tour, this last tour of the US and Canada. And $13,000 I'll have to pay back for like $3,000.
Oh, What's the interest rate? I don't think people realize how interest accumulates so
They
intensely.
don't really, they kind of tell it to you in payments. So I was trying to find their truth in lending disclosure. I actually had worked in, makes it even more horrible. I worked in finance in my 20s
Uh-huh.
in real estate finance. So I definitely understand how truth in lending disclosures work. I want to say it's like 100 and something percent.
Mm,
Um, when you
mm,
add the charges, it's over 4 years. Um,
right. Oh my God. Well, and it's so horrible. And I think that this is the trap that so many of us are caught in. Like,
yeah.
it's like I hate it when people write these articles and they're like, poor people just need to be doing blah, blah, blah. Like, buy your like beans in bulk and like, be smart about saving. And I'm like, it's not that we don't know this shit. It's not that we're stupid. It's like, to me, like poor people are the best money managers ever because we have to figure out how to work the system in order to survive. And that like condescension thing is like so frustrating. And it's like, it's not that you didn't know what you were doing. It's that we don't have any choices oftentimes,
Yeah.
or all choices are bad choices. And so, like, I think that this like American ability to talk ourselves into like bad choices and moralize it. I mean, that's the part that's really hard is that like there are like millions of people out there who are going to treat you like a moral failure because of what you did to get a car to go on tour, you know? And it's
Oh,
like,
I mean, and I look at those people like you can get fucked because you can point your finger at me or the rest of the band for not having money or saving or whatever the situation is and tell the greatest story about how everybody in your band has a job and they all save money. But you know what? I'm in a band with some amazing individuals. And at the time, we had an opportunity to play some really good shows with a larger act
mhm,
throughout the United States and Canada. Cats didn't have the money at the time. And I will compare it to any major Fortune 500 corporation that's begging for money right now after reporting record profits.
mhm,
So
mhm.
I feel no shame
Good.
getting a loan when I know the airline industry, after reporting record profits, didn't invest in new planes,
Mhm.
infrastructure, raising the wages of pilots and flight attendants, making seats bigger and roomier. Nope. They went ahead
No.
and bought their own stock. So anyone
Yep.
that has anything to say about me or anyone like me that has to do a payday loan or get a loan on your car, you can get fucked because we live in a country where major industry is doing this shit every time they fuck up.
Right, right. And they're doing it in partnership with Congress and the president. I mean, that's the thing is that Congress could have written in, you get this bailout only if you are keeping people's jobs going, only if you are not cutting anybody's benefits. I mean, they could have put all kinds of things in place and they didn't do it,
Yeah.
and like and so it's like we're like our elected officials are absolutely complicit in this like capitalistic bullshit. And it also, I mean, this also makes me really angry and gets me like all riled up, but you know this is why I'm running, is that like, this is not representing the people. This is just 100% about who your wealthy fucking donors are. And it has nothing to do with actually taking care of your constituents. And then people are like, but I don't want to be paying for people's free stuff. And I'm like, so you're fine with like paying for Bank of America's free stuff, but you're not okay with like paying for your neighbor's thing that is coming from their taxes. Like, really? Like, it's just completely
I
maddening.
maybe we need to, because you said that, I'm just thinking here, and I'm totally just riffing here. Maybe we need to start reframing the statement as you're totally fine with paying overdraft fees
Yeah.
to a company that makes billions in overdraft fees, and then they go overdraft, and then you pay them again through your
Right.
own tax dollars.
Right.
Like,
Yeah. No, I mean, and this is another reason why, like the public banking thing feels really important to me is like, I don't think that finance should be a for-profit industry. And if there is going to be any profit from it, I think it should be put directly back into the public good. And we have one state right now that has a public bank, which is North Dakota, which is not like a bastion of liberalism. If you've ever hung out
Not
in
at all.
and and California just passed a thing that is going to make it possible for municipalities in California to create their own public banks. And like, I absolutely think that this is something that needs to be happening. And like, the finance industry is just like evil, man, just like evil incarnate.
Oh yeah, there's a great book called Homewreckers.
Mm,
I can't remember the author's name off the top of my head. I just finished it, and it basically is a great in-depth reporting of the financial crisis and how people like Steve Mnuchin, Michael Dell, George Soros, and at the end of the book talks about kind of the Trump family, how they all took advantage
mm.
of the housing crisis and profited from it. And for people like Mnuchin, got government positions. That's
Right.
the Treasury Secretary right now.
Ugh, yes.
The guy that took your house is a Treasury Secretary.
Right. Yeah, one of the funnier like trolls on my campaign page the other day was some dude was like, "I bet she's taking money from George Soros," and I was like, "Oh my God,
Jesus
like, George
Christ.
Soros is going to touch me with a 20 fucking foot pole? Like, no way! Like, y'all are not getting the power dynamics here." And like, I am the least likely candidate in this race to be like they're not even trying to offer me money.
So you can look at the campaign money in the Republican side. I couldn't see it for the Democratic side uh, for people running,
Uh-huh.
and there's some people raising a lot of money.
Totally. Totally.
There's some
Yeah.
Republicans raising a lot of money, and also I don't think the average person, because you hear these Ben Shapiro's and Candace Owens of the world say George Soros' name like he's the Koch brother of the left, which he is not.
Right. Right.
Is not. Like, he
No.
literally, I believe he was a partner in One West Bank, which was the bank that bought IndyMac and foreclosed on all those homes
Right.
with Mnuchin and all those other ghouls. So George Soros is not the person people think he is.
Oh God, no, not at all. Well, and I also think there's a lot of confusion about like it was that thing I was saying earlier about like that line is actually running down the middle of the Democratic Party. And like, people think that like liberals are the left. And it's like that, no, we're not actually the same creatures at
Not at
all.
all. Yeah, not
And
at
like,
all.
you know, liberals are still pretty much bought into capitalism being a good thing. And like mostly on the left, we're like, no, 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 no. This is actually like the problem. And I think it's tough when like we're like the only viable way for most of us to run for office is to run as Democrats. And I feel like I'm a Democrat in sort of the really old school sense of what Democrats were in terms of like really being the party of the people and like I say, like the AOC wing and the Bernie wing
Yeah,
of
the Party of
party.
Labor.
Yeah, it's like much more the Labor Party. And it's a very uncomfortable fit, with a lot of people in the Democratic Party who just like don't get that it's not just about who chooses to put a D in front of their name. Like that's really what it is. Like Mike Bloomberg just like decided to put a D in front of his name, and suddenly it would have been like vote blue no matter who. Bloomberg, really? And like Donald Trump was a Democrat for a long
For
time and
years. For
decided to
years.
put an R in front of his name. It's like their choice to put a D in front of their name has nothing to do with whether they're my people or not. You know? Ugh, super
Which,
frustrating.
and again, listening to your interview on that call-in show, it really, I was listening to it and I was thinking, now I've been to Wyoming and I know there are definitely pockets of progressives.
Yeah, for
There's
sure.
pockets of people that are way further left than myself. Um, but there's definitely swaths of the antithesis of that.
Yeah.
How I felt you did as good a job as you could, because as we talked off air, you said that the host really didn't know people were going to act the way they acted on the show. And
Yeah.
for anyone that wants to hear, Yana, who is, as you can hear, speaks very well. She has a great platform, great progressive platform. She's explaining her platform. She's not saying anything super radical on the show. Radical in the sense of she's like, it's not Marx on the show, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
um, and these people that are calling in are pretty much acting as if she's an authoritarian dictator, uh, ready to take their guns away, kill all industry, and have a sea of slaves in the state of Wyoming.
Oh my God. Yes. Which
Do
is like,
do you do you have to bypass them at some point and just like I can't even talk to this contingent?
I mean, honestly, that I'm not getting a ton of like offers to go into those spaces. So the ones that I'm getting, I mean, I'm doing any interviews that are getting offered to me right now, and
Gotcha.
and some of those are end up being in pretty right leaning spaces. Um, and so I don't think that, like, I haven't really lost patience with it yet. I mean, if you're going to run as an openly queer woman and an open socialist in one of the reddest states in the country, like, you've got to know that you're going to get that occasional person who like screams into the phone, "Why do you hate America?" and hangs up. You just have to know that that is going to be part of the deal. And so I mean, I think the most important thing is to not bite when somebody says that. And I honestly, like I feel like I got a little bit flustered in that interview because that was the first time that something like that had happened, that was that, like, just outrageously blatant. And so I feel like I would probably deal with it a little bit differently now. But the host was basically like, "Don't even answer that." Like I think he got it, that it was like, that was totally inappropriate and off and had nothing to do with what I had been saying. So, mostly I feel like the press in Wyoming has been um, confusedly supportive, maybe would be the way to say it. Like, they don't know what to do with me, but they're not being jerks. And
You
they're
could be
trying.
their you could be their AOC,
I
right?
know, I know. Yeah. And
And
this is
maybe
not,
they look at you as that.
well, this is not Brooklyn. So, we're very different, very different scene here. And one of my goals with this campaign is really that, that education about socialism. Like, I am running to win. Like, I am totally down with being the next senator from the state of Wyoming. And I also recognize that it's always been a long shot. It's been 50 years since we elected a Democrat to represent us in DC from the state of Wyoming. We've had Democratic governors a lot more recently, but it's been a very long time since we've kind of broken through that. And I mean, my sense is, like, I don't think a moderate Democrat is going to be able to break through that. I think if it's going to be somebody who's talking more about working class solidarity and is just talking about things really differently and non-shamingly, and talking about community and talking about, just talking about things in a really different way. And so I think I have as good of a shot at this as anyone running with the D next to their name. Um and there's definitely going to be like jerk moments. Mostly those jerk moments happen behind the scenes in private Facebook messages. That's where I've been getting most of the really horrible stuff. And that's easy enough to just ignore.
Well, thank you for replying to my Facebook message. I was trying to be I was like, I think this, as I'm writing it to you, I'm like, oh, I'm pretty sure this poor person probably gets a ton of crazy stuff. So,
Yeah. Well, and I love doing podcasts. I mean, it's been really fun. And partly because what doing podcasts like this does is it also gives people a different look into Wyoming. Like, I think there are a lot of stereotypes on the coast about Wyoming, and I want to sort of give people a glimpse into a version of Wyoming that they're maybe not seeing and hearing. And I think that's really good.
So the one thing you said on the show that I really dug, and a lot of people don't really talk about this too much, is the fact that we have done, and there's a great book about it, How to Hide an Empire. Um, we have hidden the empire to a certain degree with military bases.
Yeah.
You brought up the point that I believe we have military bases in 171 countries throughout the world.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. Yeah. Most countries in the world have US military presence. Like we just
And
leave people alone.
no, yeah, they're little. They're actually like on these little sovereign nations, and they bring about a lot of problems. Um, if you read the book, and there's definitely quite a few books about the U.S. empire, but in the book How to Hide an Empire, the author actually kind of goes in depth on the relationship between the U.S. and the Bin Laden family, like how that relationship started in general with building out military bases and Osama's issue with U.S. bases.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but you had brought something up about U.S. military bases and being big polluters.
Yeah.
And it was a statistic that actually comes from the U.S. military.
Yes. Yeah. And a gentleman was highly offended, called in.
He actually, yeah, he said that you were wrong.
Yeah.
That made me more mad. Listen to this show. I was fuming. That made me more mad than anything. But to your point about that, I'm reading Gregory Wilpert's book about Chavez taking power in Venezuela.
Mm-hmm.
And the way he integrated the military in with everyday life sounded a lot like what you had mentioned doing with the military when it came to fighting climate change.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, my basic stance on this is that I believe that like the enemy we need to be paying attention to right now is climate disruption. It's not, I personally feel no threat from people in whatever it is, 170 other countries. Like the thing that I feel like is threatening my family's life and my community's lives is climate disruption hand in hand with that, I think, is the economic insecurity stuff. And I blame capitalism for both of those things,
Mm-hmm.
surprisingly, I guess. And so what I'm proposing, because the United States is the largest single carbon emitter of like any entity in the world, is the U.S. military, and that was the factoid that the gentleman pushed back against, to put it tactfully. And you know, so my sense is that what would be most beneficial is to actually bring a large chunk of the military home and put them to work, because this is a group of people that are well coordinated. They're used to cooperating with each other. They're skilled. They're in excellent physical condition. It's like this is the perfect asset, actually, for us to be fighting climate disruption. Is like put these folks to work building infrastructure, building trees, doing sustainable farming. And also then this is also job training for a bunch of these folks for after they get out of the military. I mean, if they've got skills, putting up wind towers or, doing permaculture based farming and that kind of stuff, the stuff that would actually really make a difference, planting a portion of those 1 trillion trees that the scientists are telling us we should be planting worldwide in order to like really combat climate disruption. And so I think that would be the best thing to do. And I also think that it would significantly reduce the number of vets who are walking around with PTSD. Like no one has ever gotten PTSD from planting trees. And this is like not true for like people who go into the military. I mean, the levels of PTSD and like not to mention like coming home with like injuries that like drastically change your life. Like I would really like us to actually, see the military as like right now it is part of the problem with climate disruption. And I think it can be part of the solution. And that's a very permaculture thing. The problem is the solution is one of the core permaculture principles, and I think we should be viewing the military through that lens.
I I thought you had a great point. It's just the man that called. If you don't mind, I'll put a link to that interview, or do you not want me to?
That's fine. That's fine. I mean, just remember what I said about like I feel like I feel better now. But yeah, it was a fascinating interview, and I do think that the host was not trying to set me up. I think he runs a conservative talk radio show. That's what he does. So I think he was trying to mitigate things. So credit to
It was
him.
just so funny because when you said everything, basically you just said right now, you said a little more shorter and concise in that show.
Mhm.
And the guy and a gentleman calls up and he's like, "Hey, you ever been to Southeast Asia?" which I thought was like hilarious. Like,
Right.
no, I've been to New York. You know what I mean? What do you? There you go. I've been to New York. What do you? I've been to I've been to Wyoming. You know,
Right.
and
Right.
and he was like, "Well, there's pollution in Southeast Asia." Word.
Anyway, I'm with you, man. Next.
Yeah, it's like you're wrong,
Right.
and you know he had nothing to quote. It was just a anger and how dare
Yeah.
you talk bad about the military. I just thought it was a little maddening because he just the off the cuff anger,
Right.
not based in anything other than emotion.
Right. Right. Well, people are hurting in this state. I mean, that is definitely a nearly universal reality, unless you are one of the super rich, and we've got them. And it's a good state to come if you're super rich because we have no income tax. And so we get targeted with folks moving here. But if you are not in that category, I mean, I think almost everybody is struggling. And it's like, what do we blame that on? And they're so used to blaming it on liberals, and they don't know the difference between a liberal and a socialist. And so I get lumped in with that, and it definitely is uphill. I would love to be able to be having more real conversations. The interesting thing is how many Republicans have very quietly back channel contacted me, and I'm having lovely conversations with them behind the scenes. And so it gives me some hope, that I think being able to admit that you're talking to the socialist may still be a little bit too scary for people, but they're talking to me.
Well, you're running on a platform that people can't deny. I mean, you can't deny that you are in a state that is definitely lacking in healthcare.
Yep.
It is so sparse and rural, and I don't think enough people really understand the amount of rural hospital closures that are happening right now
Yeah.
throughout the nation, especially like in the South is really bad too.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm reading that your state is lacking emergency room doctors,
right,
then healthcare for all is a real big solution to a place that has literally the highest suicide rate of adults between the ages of 35 to 44.
Yeah.
So to me, you are the solution to cleanse Wyoming of Liz Cheney.
Yeah, I sort of wish that she had gotten into the Senate race, because that would have been sort of fun to take on the Cheney clan, but she's not. She's staying in the House. Cynthia Lummis, though, I mean, there's like 7 Republicans now in this primary, so like, but she is kind of the one to beat. She is further right than Liz Cheney. She is basically running on the "I have Donald Trump's back" platform. Like, if you look at her
Jesus.
website, there is no there's like 7 or 8 bullet points on her website and no actual content. It's like, it is literally meant to obfuscate and to like not make it clear like how much she hates working people. And it's just yeah. Anyway, she's the one I get to take on.
Well, I saw your rebuttal video to I'm going to say his name wrong. I keep wanting to say Bolsonaro.
Close. No, but it's a Barrasso.
Barrasso.
Yep.
I kept saying Bolsonaro.
Yeah.
That was I really liked that video, that rebuttal video to all the insane things that
it was fun.
that he was saying.
It was fun. Yeah. Yeah.
And your Republican soon to be adversary in this race, running to the right of Liz Cheney, says a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and the thing is, like, Liz Cheney is at least smart. And I don't really
Uh-huh.
think Cynthia Lummis is that smart. She's in there like really parroting a lot and not, there's not a lot of original thinking there. And so, I mean, it's pretty heartbreaking to me that, that she probably will end up with this seat. And um, anyway, so we're doing everything we can to like head that possibility off. And, if folks want to support us, that's great. I mean, you don't have to be in Wyoming to be supportive of a race in Wyoming. And yeah, so that would be terrific. And, I would be making decisions for you too.
Yes, in the Senate, we need some people to run against Mitch, and that was another thing that we definitely want to put. I'm going to put links up on the page. The first link I'll put up, even before our own, will be the One to Year campaign, so people can donate. I think it's important that as leftists, we have to support our real leftists running for Senate, Congress. Here in San Francisco, we have a socialist DA.
Nice, nice. And you have Shahid Buttar. Man, that's
Yeah.
incredible. So I got to meet him at we were both at the National Democratic Socialist of America convention last August, and the hotel was really weird, and the elevators took like sometimes like it would take like 10 to 15 minutes for the elevator to get up to your floor, and we were staying on the same floor, and so I actually ended up chatting with him for about 15 minutes one day while we were waiting for the elevator and on the way down, and took a picture together, and I kind of went a little fangirl on him because I think he's amazing. But yeah, I mean, Shahid he is absolutely the real deal. So you're very fortunate in San Francisco to be able to vote for Shahid.
Oh no, I do some volunteer. I definitely did a lot of canvassing for Shahid. I know him
Great,
well.
great.
Love him to death.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully going to get him on here sooner than later. He's been trying to do live streams as well while we're down. This
Yeah.
is really hurting for canvassing right now.
Mm-hmm.
How is it for you when it comes to canvassing in such a, like I said, sparsely populated state?
Yeah, canvassing has always been tough in Wyoming. I mean, in a weird sort of way, these circumstances are really working well for those of us who are like comfortable with like podcasts and like radio interviews and that kind of stuff. Because we don't have the resources to have like crews all over the state doing canvassing anyway. And so the fact that we're not being able to do it right now I think it's hurting other candidates more than it's hurting us. Because I'm totally happy to do this kind of stuff. And so, so basically our whole campaign has gone to online, which means I'm doing a lot of interviews. I'm doing every Thursday and every Sunday, I'm doing a live session online around some particular topic. And then we're doing a lot of phone banking. And right now we're actually having a lot of fun with it. Right now we are calling every registered voter, regardless of party, between the ages of 18 and 35, because we think that they are our sort of critical voter pool for winning this election. And the folks who are calling have been like saying like it's actually being really fun talking to like young Republicans, and I'm like, great. So I think it's really awesome. It's like these are people who I would also be representing, and and I think that like younger people, like they don't care that I'm queer. They don't think the word
Yeah.
socialist means like as terrible things. I mean, even if they have been voting Republican by default because that's what everybody does around them, like they're just so much more open-minded. And so that's actually been really fun, and the phone bankers are having a blast right now, and it's been great.
Um, yeah, I was going to say what's been kind of the main theme of the people. What is the main concern of the average Wyomingian?
I don't know that there's one main concern. I mean, I definitely think the economy and like what happens to us when coal is gone is on a lot of people's minds. The suicide epidemic I hear about a lot. We just had a suicide a couple weeks ago of like a friend of ours in Laramie here. And so it's, I think that COVID is making those statistics even worse everywhere. And it's just, we were already really bad here. So I hear about that a lot. Let's see, what else do we hear? Public lands are actually a really big issue, and it's part of my climate stabilization platform is like increasing the amount of public lands we have. And my main Republican opponent, Cynthia Lummis, is terrible on this issue. She actually is a founding member. She was our House rep before Liz Cheney. And during that time, she actually founded a Republican caucus whose like whole purpose is to get the feds to sell off public lands. And public lands are hugely popular and important to Wyoming. It's like our second most important natural resource is our public lands. We have Yellowstone National Park, Teton National Park, Devil's Tower, the Bighorn Mountains. And we have so much beautiful, amazing recreation space in this state. And it's really important that we preserve it. And that is not what the Republicans are about. So I hear about that a lot from people. And I think healthcare is just really, really big for everybody and has just gotten bigger in the last couple months.
Yes. Yes. Didn't, am I wrong that Trump was trying to privatize some land in Wyoming, or was that Utah?
He was. He's also done a thing with like a one of the Indian tribes has lost a chunk of their reservation land to Trump shenanigans, and so yeah, he's doing all kinds of stuff. So Bears Ears in Utah, it was the one that got the most publicity. That he has, opened up leases on again and is trying to privatize a bunch of it, but he's doing it everywhere. I mean, he got somebody in there who just is really like, they're neoliberals. They think everything should be privatized. And so that's getting applied to public education. It's getting applied to public lands. Basically, if you have the word public before it, the Republicans are going after it right now.
They'll show you how bad it is and why it needs to be privatized because
Yep.
the business sector can run it better.
Yes.
That Indian land you were talking about, was that the one where there was supposed to be a casino built on it?
I don't actually know all the details of it. It's in Massachusetts. It's one of the tribes out on the East Coast that has just, but I think it was like 300 acres or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was
So,
trying to find out about that by some people there, and it was kind of hard to, when they're fighting, it's kind of hard to break through on the and get like real information from the native
right.
side because who do you trust?
Right. It's right. The tribal leadership, the people on the ground, sometimes they're not the same people.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
I definitely get that.
Yeah.
Yana, I do have a question for you, and you can say no if you want to. My feelings won't be hurt.
Okay.
Could we do this again in like a few weeks?
Yeah.
Like almost make this like I can shorten the segment, and we can have like Jay and Yana talk about current events, and not so much current events, but like events that are affecting people, and definitely affecting people where you are, and how that you know what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that would be super fun. This has been great.
Because I'm having a ball talking to you. I definitely love your platform. I would love to see a state like Wyoming move in a progressive direction.
Yes, you and me both.
Thank you, Yana, for your time. I'm going to play some outro music. Please don't hang up.
Okay. All right. I'm with you.
All right, don't hang up.
Okay.